So, picture this, it's November 2025. The entire New York City political machine just gets completely shattered. And not by some billionaire or a member of a political dynasty, the usual suspects. No, it was a 34-year-old Democratic Socialist who, and you gotta love this, also happened to be a self-described B-list rapper. Which, of course, leads to the big question, right? The one we're gonna unpack today. How does a guy like that, an underdog, an immigrant, a rapper, actually pull off a win in all 5 boroughs and take City Hall? I mean, how? Okay, to really get just how huge this was, let's start with one single number, 34. That's how old Zohran Mamdani was on election night. And that one fact alone was enough to completely rewrite the city's history books. I mean, that makes him the youngest mayor to lead the city in over 100 years, a whole century. And believe me, that historic first, it was just the beginning of the story. On top of that, he also became the city's first Muslim mayor and its first South Asian mayor. So, you see, this wasn't just another election win. This was a massive, fundamental shift in what was possible in New York City. So, yeah, what we all witnessed was nothing short of a political earthquake. And today, we're going to break down exactly how this 34-year-old Democratic Socialist, and, that just means someone who believes society should work for everybody, not just for a handful of people at the top, how he completely tore up the political rulebook. And here's the thing, the secret. It wasn't big money. It wasn't some old-school political machine. The real heart of his victory was all about reaching people who had been ignored for decades and actually putting them at the very center of the story. So, that's the real puzzle, isn't it? How do you actually get those communities, the ones who've been invisible for so long, to mobilize and build enough power to take on the entire establishment? Well, the answer, and this is really the key to the whole thing, it isn't found in any traditional political playbook. It's much simpler and much more powerful. It's about being a master storyteller. So, to really get our heads around this, we're going to break his campaign down just like you would a movie. We'll look at the cinematography, the main character's origin story, the script, the big election night climax, and of course, the unwritten final act. First up, let's talk cinematography. Seriously, this campaign was a masterclass. Forget those stiff, boring podium speeches. Instead, you got this candid, shaky cam footage of Mamdani on the subway or inside a tenant's apartment fighting an eviction. They even used raw, crowdsourced videos from supporters. It made the whole thing feel like this living, breathing documentary where voters weren't just watching the show, they were in it. They were part of the cast. And of course, every great story needs a hero with a compelling origin story. That's what we see here. He was born in Uganda to a filmmaker and a scholar, so you could say storytelling and critical thinking were in his blood. But the real turning point, the moment that defined him, was his work as a housing counselor in Queens. Fighting evictions, right there on the front lines, that experience became the absolute bedrock of his political identity. It connected him directly to the city's real, everyday struggles. But look, great visuals and a strong character, that's not quite enough. Right? The real genius was in the script, the language they used. Take this one line from a viral video that just exploded. It was, "Mere paas maa hai." Now, to a lot of people, that might not mean much, but to millions of South Asians, it's instantly recognizable. It's from a classic Bollywood movie. It's this powerful comeback where a hero, faced with his wealthy, corrupt brother bragging about all his money and power, just says, "I have my mother." And this is it's brilliant. It shows the strategy perfectly. He was plugging directly into this deep emotional story about integrity versus corruption. It was his way of looking at a huge part of the electorate and saying, "I see you. I get it. We're on the same page." And this strategic use of language didn't stop there. The campaign often used the word mazdoor, which is an Urdu term for a worker or a laborer. Now, this wasn't just some casual nod to his heritage. It was a bridge. It used a very specific cultural touchstone to talk about a universal idea. Working-class solidarity. It was a way to connect with everyone, from taxi drivers to nurses to baristas, no matter their background. And when you put his campaign side by side with the traditional one, wow, the difference is just stark. The old playbook, right? It's English only, it's always chasing some imaginary median voter, and it relies on flooding the airways with TV ads. Mamdani's campaign was the total opposite. It was multilingual, it was culturally specific, and it used social media to meet voters exactly where they actually are. So what was the plot of this whole story? Super simple, super powerful. Affordability. His agenda wasn't some boring 100-page policy document that no one's going to read. It was a list of clear, tangible promises you could fit on a postcard. Freeze rents, make the buses free, universal childcare, city-owned grocery stores. Look, whether you agreed with the policies or not, there was no confusion. You knew exactly what this guy stood for. Okay, so the stage is set, the characters are in place, the plot is clear. Now we get to the climax of our movie, election night. This is where we see if this whole unconventional strategy actually pays off. And the results were absolutely stunning. In the Democratic primary, Mamdani is up against a political giant, former Governor Andrew Cuomo. And he doesn't just squeak by, he wins decisively. 43% to 36%. It was a clear mandate, and it sent absolute shockwaves through the entire establishment. But the victory itself, believe it or not, wasn't even the whole story. Just look at this number. This election saw the single biggest voter turnout for a New York City mayoral race in more than 50 years. And that right there is the crucial point. His campaign didn't just sway the usual voters from one side to the other, it did something much more radical. It made the entire pie bigger. Remember all those unseen people we talked about? The ones the campaign was built for? Well, they didn't just feel seen. They actually showed up. They registered, and they voted. But winning the election, that's really just the end of Act 1, isn't it? Now comes the really hard part, governing. The final act of this story is still being written, and it all comes down to whether this movement can actually turn all those promises into reality. And make no mistake, the powerful interests he took on, they didn't just pack up and go home. As mayor, he's facing incredible pressure from Wall Street, he's got potential budget threats from the federal government, and he has to walk that constant tightrope between police reform and public safety. And on top of all that, there's the biggest risk of all, that the same establishment he defeated will just try to swallow him whole. Which leaves us with the ultimate question, the one we have to ask ourselves. Was this whole thing a perfect storm? You know, a unique candidate and a unique city at just the right moment in history? Or did we just witness the birth of a brand new playbook for American politics? A blueprint for how you can win by telling a better, more inclusive, more powerful story? That is the unwritten final act that we are all about to watch.